Hey everyone, long time no see. Thought I'd do a little end of the year list or beginning of the year list. Happy New Year, by the way. I want to do something a little different. It's not, instead of a best of 2024 list, I'm just going to give you 8 films that I saw this year that I really loved that just came out whenever. Films that, in particular, I really had not heard of before watching it. And 5 of them are horror or horror adjacent. The other 3 not so much. I took this idea from a great YouTube channel called Eyebrow Cinema. Truly one of the best channels out there. It's truly one of the best channels out there if you're interested in really expanding your passion for movies beyond the mainstream and digging into like some of the classics of cinema. He's such a great gateway drug for that. First movie on the list is The Fan, or Der Fan in the original German. An excellent film about a teenage girl with an unhealthy, to say the least, obsession with a pop star. She writes letter after letter after letter to him in the beginning to no avail. Her voiceover is just constantly rhapsodizing, poetic about just how she is his true love, and one day they are destined to be together. And it's a story about someone addicted to a dream, to the point that she is nothing without her identity as this guy's tragic, true love who must pine alone forever. While it's not a horror movie in the purest sense, it is a story that one feels from the beginning cannot possibly end well. And indeed, the lengths she winds up going to protect that loneliness is truly horrific. Would make a great double feature with Takashi Miike's Audition, if that gives you any indication. Eaten Alive, directed by the great Tobe Hooper. This is what he made after Texas Chainsaw Massacre, like right after it. This is an evil movie about a deranged veteran who feeds people to a crocodile. Seriously, it's so mean. I did not like it the first time I saw it because it was just non-stop nastiness, even nastier than Texas Chainsaw Massacre, I would say. And I don't entirely know if that's a compliment. Like, the credits rolled and I was just like, oh God, thank God that's over. But then a week later, it just hadn't left my mind. And so I thought, well, I'll turn it on in the background while I do other stuff. I'm kind of working on a Tobe Hooper video way later one of these days. So, maybe it'll give me some ideas for notes or whatever. And absolutely every scene, there were just so many moments where I couldn't help leaning forward and being like, ooh, here comes that part. Oh no, here comes this part. Just every single second of this thing is burned into my brain forever. And maybe it's great, maybe. Don't watch it. The Funhouse, also directed by Tobe Hooper. Like I said, been watching a lot of Tobe Hooper this year. So while Texas Chainsaw Massacre assaults you with pure horror from start to finish, The Funhouse has a more subtle touch. Like, don't get me wrong, it's a movie about a big freak chasing teenagers through a haunted house, but at its heart, it is in conversation with the concept of horror as this inescapable force that draws us all in like a moth to the flame. The giant evil carny monster wears a mask of Frankenstein's monster. The movie begins with a really funny homage to Psycho and the original Halloween. And there is the seedy carnival itself, where our teenagers spend half of the movie really just having a good time before anything truly violent happens. There's always the threat of violence, even though it's really just a normal, gross carnival where, people have where there are freak shows and just magicians carving people in half. It's just there's something kind of macabre in the context of a horror movie, these scenes, because there's something similar to it and the bloodbath that follows. It's people trying to get a peek at something strange and wrong. The entire back half of the movie is spent locked in the titular funhouse, and our characters are just surrounded by these leering, giggling dolls, predator and prey, lost in a maze of humanity's repressed id, screaming in our faces. The teenagers who get killed are technically done in by the monster guy, but their dooms are filmed in a way that it seems like the funhouse is killing them. And the same goes for when the baddies get what's coming to them. All the familiar horror iconography in this movie feels to me like an effort by the part of the characters in society to commodify fear until it is made impotent. And the funhouse really peels back the plastic to find that all of this industry is rooted in the same irresistibly primordial, lizard-brained frenzy that can never be truly tamed. This is the most experimental film in this list by a wide margin, and I in a weird way, I think like one of the most widespread appeal kind of movies. I just think it's so much fun. The experiment bears such like rich fruition. This is at first a documentary for the first third of it, the 1979 part of it, in which the filmmaker Trent Harris is I think just goofing around with the camera in a parking lot for the local TV station that he works for. I saw this last January, so some of these details might be a little wonky, but he attracts the curiosity of this bro who's just like, is that a camera? Cool. And this guy loves being filmed. He talks and talks and talks. It's just one of those happy cinematic accidents. And it's one of those movies where it really is just about a filmmaker who meets a stranger that invites us into his life. And this eccentric guy that we come to know as Groovin' Gary is just so excited and unguarded, really too pure for this world. Like out of the blue, he invites the filmmaker to come to this drag show where he's going to be singing as an Olivia Newton-John impersonator. And so the filmmaker goes and records it, and that by itself would be a great short documentary, right? And as indeed it originally was only that. It's a story about this guy who, of course, in a way, it is kind of a trans narrative, right? It's someone who is experimenting with gender identity at a time before he really had the vocabulary for what he was doing, or really before even he had a community to like affirm any of this. There's a point where he's like, no, I'm not a woman, which is why I'm not using she pronouns here. As far as I know, he never transitioned officially. I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, but I want to use he, him to refer to him. In addition to that, I think it's just about someone who has something that he's just excited to express and share with the world in a way that like is kind of unaware of like what the world might think of it. He never seems to consider what the ramifications of pointing a camera at this might be, and that's what makes him so fascinating. And in documentary style, like as a documentary, the viewer is sort of left to their own devices as to whether to laugh at him or to be truly like in love with him and to root for him. I think by the end, once he actually performs, only a true monster would still be laughing at that point. I saw this in a screening, and people were just zoned in by that point. But what's really fascinating here is that after the release of the documentary, Trent Harris went on to shoot a fiction version, or an adaptation, I guess, that is a scripted drama of this encounter, of this documentary. And he makes it not once in 1981, but then again in 1984. The first film is starring a pre-fame Sean Penn as Groove and Gary, and the second time has a pre-fame Crispin Glover. Like, the dude just is great at casting, I guess. And so the Beaver trilogy compiles these three films, and that's the one that came out in 2000. That's why there's all these dates here. What follows is a project that really lays bare the challenges of faithful and respectful adaptation. The Sean Penn one is really kind of mean-spirited at times. The film is really unable to resist going for easy jokes at Groove and Gary's expense. Not always, but there are definitely times where it seems like we're supposed to laugh at the freak. And I remember in the theater, there's definitely like some uncomfortable wrestlings in those moments. And Sean Penn's performance is incredibly accurate. He's just a pitch perfect Groove and Gary. But in that accuracy, he also, I think unintentionally, preserves a lot of the obliviousness of this guy. His vulnerabilities are just as out there as the documentary subject, but it's uncomfortable now because, of course, the actor is not displaying this obliviousness accidentally. The Crispin Glover short feels like a kind of atonement for the first one, and it is a triumphant one. Crispin Glover's performance is not nearly as accurate. Instead, he channels the essence of this guy through his own sensibilities, and that distance feels respectful in a way that makes it easier to empathize with and root for him. It's one of Crispin Bell's best performances. And just the script is more thoughtful about putting you in his corner. His desire to dress in drag feels more like this natural, beautiful thing, and those who would judge this as absurd are depicted as the real freaks. It's a great movie, truly one of a kind. If you only see one movie here, I would recommend this one, even though I don't think it's streaming anywhere, but I'm just telling you, if anything I've said intrigues you at all, it's worth dropping some dollars here to at least rent it on video on demand or something. Opera by Dario Argento. Shoot, I should know that. Anyway, all I knew about this movie was, going into it, was that a killer puts this bladed contraption on a woman's eyelids so that she can't close her eyes as he kills her friends in front of her. That's just such a horrible premise on its own. But I thought she was just gonna be like tied up in a room the whole time. The killer would bring the victims to her or something. I didn't realize that each time he kills somebody, he then lets her go and just keeps on popping up at when she least expected and wrestling her into submission time and time again. It's just so fucked up. What a great movie. The Time That Remains by Elias Lyman. If you can believe it, this is a really funny movie about the Israeli occupation of Palestine. Wow. The movie begins with the Israeli invasion of Palestine in 1948. Our main character is a freedom fighter trying to repel them. But of course the invasion succeeds, and what follows is this man growing old in an occupied home with nothing to fight for and nothing to live for. Yeah, it's still a pretty somber film, and the comedy is quite deadpan. And all I know to do to give you a taste of it is just list some of the jokes. After the invasion, the Israeli military forces a mayor at gunpoint to sign this new constitution that strips everyone of their rights and gives Israel unilateral power to do whatever they want. And, the guy nods, sighs, starts to sign it, stops, thinks, and goes, "What's today's date?" Or maybe my favorite joke is this bit where a guy is taking the trash out and crossing the street to put it in the bin, and there's this big Israeli tank in the street that he has to walk past, and as he crosses the street, the turret of the tank follows him, and the guy doesn't really react or look at it at all, but it's really harrowing and terrifying. He puts the trash in the bin, crosses the street again, the turret follows him again, and then when he gets to the other side of the street, he gets a phone call. He takes the phone call and just starts pacing around the street back and forth as the turret follows him around. Like, the comedy is found in the impossible absurdity of being expected to live a normal life in an occupied land. Really special movie, Bambi. Okay, so I lied. I have heard of Bambi before. I've seen it before, but I've been watching a lot of kids stuff now that I'm a dad, and this one it kind of was like seeing it for the first time. It's easily a top 5 Disney movie for me now. There are horror directors whose entire oeuvre never comes close to the little micro scene in this movie where a few birds beg another scared bird not to fly up because she'll certainly be shot. I don't know what they were doing to that voice actor to make her sound so scared, but yikes. Yeah, Bambi rocks. Like, it's truly one of those they don't make them like they used to anymore kind of movies. I think of the old Disney classics, in my opinion, it's underhyped because it's more of a poem than a story, as if that makes it lesser somehow, as if like, oh, the story is slight and so it's not as good. But that is what makes it so special. This is the same creative force that gave us Fantasia. Every scene is about expressing the beauty of life and inviting us to admire that beauty, and that admiration is enough. It doesn't have to justify it with narrative, really. To say nothing of showcasing the boundless potential of animation and the beauty that this, at the time, new medium can achieve. Going from this to Moana kind of gave me a whiplash. And I quite like Moana. It's a really good movie, but there's just such a patient wonder to every frame of Bambi. A wonder that doesn't feel self-conscious about itself. It doesn't need to dilute itself with a googly-eyed idiot chicken with no brain, or to have a kooky muscle man exclaim that there's a blow dart in his butthole. Or butt cheek, he doesn't say butthole. Should have said butthole. And finally, The Butcher, or Le Boucher, by Claude Chabrol, Claude Chabrol, maybe? This is a violence-free serial killer thriller about a woman who falls in love with a man that she becomes increasingly convinced is probably a murderer of women. We never see the killings ourselves. We only hear about them in passing conversations or from the news, and I think at one point maybe we come across a body. So we only really see what she sees, and what she sees is a courtship that is truly romantic and even wholesome. And of course we get to know her. She's this authority figure that's just someone who has just been virginal for far too long, to the point that it's just weird now. So there's this deep loneliness that we are made to feel, and we don't know until the end, until whether this guy is interested in her genuinely, or if it's not some kind of sinister ruse. And without the distracting titillation of gore, what's left is a tale of empty people allowing themselves to be sucked into a bottomless void. Instead of ugh, it's more of a oof. kind of movie. And that's what I've got. I hope you all have a great year. I hope I have a great year. Hey, truly, genuinely, like, let me know if you've seen any of these movies, because nobody I know in real life has. And especially let me know if I convince you to watch one. I love that. It makes me feel like I'm doing something with my life. Some of the stuff I've talked about in this video, I've talked about on Letterboxd. I have a Letterboxd, if you did not know that. Good times on Letterboxd. Check out my Patreon. If you can give me money, I would love it if you gave me money. I'm slowing down on the Patreon perks lately, but I'm hoping to ramp it up this year. I want to pitch an idea for a Patreon exclusive, like maybe once a month I could just show you my bills and cry. Would that be appealing to anyone?